All right, man, peace. So, New Orleans Pelicans superstar Anthony Davis is obviously on the rise in the NBA hierarchy of great players. I'm on record as stating that, according to Max Kellerman's 5-star scale, I will give Anthony Davis 4.8 stars. I will not put him amongst the 5-star players yet. My 5-star players are LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Kawhi Leonard when healthy, of both body and mind. As of right now, I could not put Anthony Davis in that class, but he is rising with a bullet. According to Max Kellerman, he believes that Anthony Davis will soon surpass LeBron James as the best player in the NBA. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Meanwhile, Anthony Davis returned from a rib injury in the first half and dropped 41 on the Clippers last night as the Pelicans won their 9th straight game. Davis certainly a leading candidate for league MVP, obviously behind James Harden. I'll start with you, Max. Are we shortchanging Davis in our conversation about the MVP?
Well, before Max Kellerman answers, let me say this. No, I don't believe that Anthony Davis is getting shorted in the MVP conversation. To be quite frank with you, I think that most of the NBA MVP conversations are overly extensive, too broad. They want to include players just because they're having good months or a good half of a season. James Harden has been the NBA MVP for probably 80% of the season. There was a stretch early where LeBron looked like he was gunning for that MVP and that he had a good chance of winning it. James Harden has been the most consistent player on the most consistent team in the NBA. To me, he's going to win the MVP, and it's not particularly going to be close. Anthony Davis is trying to catch him, but he's not going to catch him because the season's not going to close off well enough for him, I don't believe. And I think that he's just been too injury prone. Now, God forbid, should James Harden get hurt in his next game and miss the last 20 or so games, how many games they have left, then he might have a chance. I believe that the Rockets have approximately 17 games left. What's their record now? As I'm making this video, I believe they're 51-14. So that's 17 games left. I don't believe that he has enough games to catch him. But what Anthony Davis has done is put the league on notice that he is about to bust through that ceiling and join the top level of players as I have them. But we'll see.
Not only about the MVP, but I would take a good look at LeBron James right now. You know, though Brady's going to fall off the cliff, and everyone got on me about that, right?
And justifiably so.
And I didn't say it about LeBron, because they don't seem to fall off the cliff in the NBA like the NFL. They seem to go into a kind of steady decline.
Well, the thing about LeBron, and I have noticed a bit of a decline in him, especially in his explosiveness and his stamina, despite the cocktail of AIDS that he's taking. And when I say the cocktail of AIDS, I'm not talking about the disease AIDS. I'm talking about that special cocktail of PEDs that he's taking, allegedly. All right? The cocktail of PEDs that he's allegedly taking.
But I'm telling you this right now, as great as LeBron is, and as he's better than the rest of the league right now.
Very slightly. Very slightly. There are many who will argue that Kevin Durant is better than him. There are some who may try to argue that Anthony Davis is right there. I will say that the difference between LeBron and the next best player, you can make the case that the difference between LeBron and the next 4 best players is infinitesimally small. I don't think that the gap is as large as it once was or as pronounced as it once was at its peak, say in 2012 or 2013. Right now, I think that the gap is smaller than it's ever been. You can make a very powerful argument that Kevin Durant is better than him or more important than him, particularly when you factor in what Kevin Durant does defensively, when you factor in what Anthony Davis does defensively, what Kawhi Leonard does defensively. Even a Steph Curry, you can argue that he's more impactful on the court than even a LeBron James offensively. And defensively, it's close between Steph Curry and LeBron James. Some people might not like that. Some people might do a Scooby-Doo. Yes. Defensively, it's close between Steph and LeBron. Now, when LeBron chooses to play defense, he's better than Steph. But I believe that Steph chooses to play defense more consistently than LeBron does.
Kawhi is hurt. The jury is out. Love KD. But when you look at Anthony Davis, both sides of the floor. KD's an excellent defender too. Anthony Davis is like an all-time great versatile defender. It's unbelievable. And he has a more versatile offense than KD's.
He really is the modern day Elijah Anthony Davis.
When you look at AD,
I wouldn't say that he has a more versatile offense than Kevin Durant, though. Anthony Davis does not have a more versatile offense than Kevin Durant. I think that Kevin Durant does not spend as much time in the low post as he should, because I think that there are a lot of easy buckets for him down there. He takes a lot of time trying to be a two guard.
I'm telling you right now, take a look at LeBron James over the next 25 or so regular season games, because I believe those will be the last games in the regular season where we still think about LeBron James as the best player in the world. I believe by the end of next season, meaning like start next season, that's going to be the year where Anthony Davis, not Kawhi, got to see with his injury, not KD, AD, Anthony Davis becomes the best player in the world starting next season. And already right now, I think the transition is underway.
For the transition to be underway, Anthony Davis is going to have to shock a couple of teams in the playoffs. In order for us to say Anthony Davis is going to take the mantle from LeBron as the best player in the NBA, he has to at least get to the conference finals this year for us to say that next year. That's why I have him at 4.8. Max Kellerman's one of these people who loves to provide hot takes. I think that you also have to take into account what players have done. What is their equity? Steph Curry, 2 MVPs, 3 finals appearances. Kevin Durant, and a regular season MVP, 2 finals appearances, a finals victory. Kawhi Leonard, finals MVP, defensive player of the year, multiple times. Anthony Davis has to do something in the playoffs. He has to. You can't just give him the mantle of best player in the NBA if he goes out in the first round again and say, well, AD didn't have any help. No, that's not going to fly.
He's not only pushing James Harden for MVP, he's pushing LeBron for the crown right now.
Well, you know, I got to agree with Captain Obvious there. There's no question about it that this is what Anthony Davis is doing. He's definitely a candidate for league MVP. He's definitely in the discussion for best player in the world. And it's just...
He's in discussion, but he has to leapfrog a lot of guys, Stephen A. Smith. It's just amazing to me how these guys get on TV every day like some damn prostitutes looking for a new man. It's like, damn. Wasn't Kawhi Leonard Max Kellerman's new flavor of the year a couple months ago? I thought that LeBron James was the greatest thing since sliced bread. A couple years ago, Steph Curry is a top 10 all-time great player. I mean, it's like that. Kevin Durant is, as Stephen A. would say, the most dominant scorer in NBA history. Now you got Anthony Davis as the best player in the NBA, and he hasn't even done anything in the playoffs yet. Don't get me wrong, I like what he's done the last month and a half or so, but he still has a lot to show. He has a lot to prove.
He just brings a different dimension to the game. You know what? He's not going to play point forward like LeBron James is, but his shot is good. He can play with his back to the basket or facing the basket.
Yeah, when he's healthy.
He can rebound. He can defend. He blocks shots. He can literally defend any position on the front line, and some two guards in this league because he's that versatile.
I'll give you that.
So he's that complete of a player. We didn't talk about him too much because the New Orleans Pelicans were not winning. But
well, what does that tell you, Stephen A. Smith? What does that tell you, sir? You can't have him as the best player in the NBA or leapfrogging 3 or 4 guys when he's had no success in the playoffs yet. When you have a transcendent player like him, he has to do something in the playoffs. When you look at Steph Curry, even before Steph Curry became an MVP, the first year that they made the playoffs in 2013, he led them past the Denver Nuggets in the first round in a series where they did not have home court. And then in the next round, they gave the Spurs a scare. That's the same Spurs team in 2013 that should have beat LeBron and the Miami Heat in the finals. People forget about that. Like, prior to Steph Curry kind of flaming out against Matthew Dellavedova in the finals in 2015, nobody ever said that Steph Curry didn't show up in the playoffs. Because even in that 2015 playoff run, he was great until Game 2 of the finals. And he hasn't quite been right rhythmically in the playoffs since then. When you look at Kawhi Leonard has had transcendent moments in the playoffs. He was able to win MVP in 2014 in the finals. We all know what LeBron has done in the playoffs. So these are the legacies that Anthony Davis is being allowed to leapfrog by Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith just because he's had a great last month and a half and he's had a very, very good career thus far. I can't say great because he's been too injury prone.
But without DeMarcus Cousins, they clearly have been doing it. Alvin Gentry deserves he's doing a hell of a job. We were wondering about him a few months ago, but Alvin Gentry has stepped up his coaching and deserves to be recognized for the outstanding job that he's been doing for them during this 9-game winning streak. But when you look at Anthony Davis, to be 6'10", 6'11", to have the inside-outside game that he has, to take over the way that he has taken over, to average about 40. And by the way, when he's doing this, it's always about 10, 12, 15, 18 rebounds along the way with a couple of block shots. You definitely have to look at him and say, when we have a discussion about the best in the world, we need to stop limiting it to LeBron James and Kevin Durant.
Well, I've never limited it to just those two players. I personally believe that Steph Curry is more impactful than Kevin Durant. Now, Kevin Durant can bring more to the table on offense and defense than Steph Curry, but to say overall that he's better than Steph Curry in regards to what he brings to a team, I don't agree with that. I think that if Kevin Durant was to be the most prominent player on the Golden State Warriors, that you would see the difference very quickly, as opposed to Steph Curry being the most prominent player. Because Steph Curry brings so much to the table in regards to the fear that he instills in the opposing team that even Kevin Durant doesn't bring. And mentally, Steph is a level above KD, who to me the verdict is still out on him mentally. So I would give KD 1A as the best player. I would give Steph 1B. I think that the difference between LeBron and Kevin Durant is paper thin. And I think that the difference between KD and Steph is paper thin. So that's how I evaluate it. And then, of course, you have Kawhi Leonard, who when fully healthy, is right there as well. But AD is knocking on the door. He just has to show me something in the playoffs.
Anthony Davis has to be inserted into that stratosphere. By the way,
and let me say this also. If James Harden wins the MVP this year and balls out in the playoffs, I will have to thrust him into that upper echelon of players with LeBron, KD, Steph, Kawhi. I do not have James Harden yet. Echelon of players with LeBron, KD, Steph, and Kawhi. I do not have James Harden up in that area with those players yet. He has a lot to prove to me, especially after how he flamed out in last year's playoffs.
Even ahead of Kawhi Leonard, because as efficient as Kawhi Leonard is, if I'm going to get in, obviously there's no comparison, Max, so please don't take it this way. But if I'm going to sit up there and look at Alonzo Ball, for example, as a rookie, and point to his level of assertiveness, I need to look the same at Kawhi Leonard when he returns. Because there are moments as great as Kawhi Leonard is, and as efficient as he is, the one thing that you could look at him from time to time is you wished that he was a bit more assertive and more aggressive offensively in terms of looking for his shot and looking for those points. It might be
Once again, sir, before you make those level of assertions, please make sure that you are understanding of what is called upon him to do within the framework of their offensive game plan. Everybody is not Kobe. Everybody does not have the green light like Kobe Bryant had to just take the ball and yell everybody else get out the way.
A product of playing the San Antonio system. It might be a product of what Greg Popovich wants him to do. But when I look at Anthony Davis, I see a willingness to take over. And that's what I'm saying elevates him above a Kawhi Leonard, because he does most of the things that Kawhi Leonard does defensively, but Kawhi doesn't do what he does offensively.
Max, on that note, let me ask you this, though. So when would Anthony Davis surpass LeBron as best player in the world? When do you see that happening?
Well,
when he has a long run in the playoffs. I don't know what Max Kellerman is going to use to try to substantiate his attempt at a point. But Anthony Davis has to have a deep, deep run into the playoffs. I'm talking deep into the Western Conference Finals, losing in Game 6 or 7 for me to call him on the level of a LeBron James or Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, or Kawhi Leonard.
Well, I mean, these things are hard to gauge as they're happening because you need a bigger body of evidence, right? So, like I'm saying, by the end of next year, it'll be obvious that, he passed LeBron. So
How could you say that it's hard to gauge because you need a bigger body of evidence and then say that by the end of next year he's going to surpass LeBron if that hasn't happened yet? You'd have to say, okay, well, over the course of the last year, I would say that AD is better than LeBron because he's had a better regular season than LeBron. He had a better playoff run. That's how that would have to happen. It's not even like AD has even had anything approximating LeBron's reign or tenure in the Eastern Conference, in the playoffs, or even in the regular season yet.
But really what I'm saying is maybe the process has started already, and next year, right from the beginning of the year, I think you're going to notice that LeBron is no better than Anthony Davis.
Right now, LeBron is watching this with a syringe in each ass cheek.
Davis has
allegedly
done things, and we got past him so quickly because of Embiid, because of Porzingis, because of Karl Anthony Towns. We're always looking for next. And as Stephen A. mentioned, when you're hidden on the Pelicans and they never really put a team around you, you're not playing.
Bullshit. They put a team around Anthony Davis. The problem is they took away the coach that was driving him to success, that being Monty Williams, and they brought in that damn trout mouth Alvin Gentry and set him back a couple of years, trying to make the team play like the Golden State Warriors with damn Rajon Rondo, who can't shoot, asking him to play like Steph Curry. That was the problem.
Playing meaningful games. So we're looking for what's next, but meantime, what's here right now is a guy who's fulfilled the potential we thought maybe he had a couple of years ago, and it's like, is this guy already a top 3 or 4 player?
Exactly. But once again, Alvin Gentry set him back a couple of years trying to have the team play like Golden State when they needed to play in a style which would bring out Anthony Davis's talents and his gifts. Same with the Boogie Cousins. Your game plan has to match up with your personnel. You can't make your personnel play a certain style of whatever team is the most successful. It doesn't work like that. And once again, that is my greatest lament about today's NBA. Back in the day, different teams had different styles. You would try to accentuate whatever the players were or whatever the gifts of the players were that you had on your squad. You didn't say, well, everybody, let's just try to shoot on the outside because that's what such and such team does. Let's everybody try to run the fast break because that's what the Lakers are doing with Magic. Let's everybody try to play, with the 3, the 4, and the 5 man running the pick and roll like the Celtics do with Bird, McHale, and Parrish. No, you tried to utilize what you had. Now everybody just wants to shoot from the outside. That's why Golden State can't be beat, because everybody wants to play like them. You have to play in a style that brings out the best of your team and say, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do to take away what Golden State does well. That's how you beat them.
Then he got hurt a little bit. He's never quite played a full season. They get him Boogie Cousins. And some were lamenting, well, this is not coming together the way it should. I'm not sure about that. They started to play better and better together. By the way, not coincidentally, the one loss the Rockets have had when they've all been healthy is to AD and Boogie.
I agree. I think that the New Orleans Pelicans were going to be a serious problem in the playoffs had Cousins stayed healthy. They were going to be a serious problem.
That was the game that Boogie got hurt in the last 10 seconds. Who knows how good the Pelicans may have been.
Keep in mind that when the Lakers did not make the NBA Finals in '86, it was because they ran into that twin towers of Hakeem Olajuwon and Ralph Sampson. When you have 2 skilled big men like that, they bring problems that no other team can really resolve. That's why Tim Duncan and David Robinson were able to be successful for those years together.
By the end of this season with those 2 playing together, AD has had to be more assertive since Boogie went down. He's able to do that. He's able to, as I've mentioned, guard the pick and roll by himself, guard both guys. Like, he's done things that I've never seen before. And he's not always the sexy pick because he's not what's next. He's not a guy who's gonna like a wing, a 2-way wing, who's gonna score 1 million points by giving you those highlight kind of plays necessarily. He's just probably, if he's not already, very soon gonna be the best 2-way player in the game. As I said, might deserve the MVP this year. Of course, Harden's just out of his mind, so maybe that's a tough call.
No, that's not a tough call. It's like these so-called NBA pundits who talk about how the DeMar DeRozan is a candidate for the MVP and, all these silly extraneous names. Like, let's just stick to what we know. We know that DeMar DeRozan is not going to take any votes away from James Harden. The only two players that are going to take any first-place votes away from James Harden are LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and neither one of them are going to win.
And maybe he's already the best in the game, but I think by the end of next year, the body of work will be there to say it much more definitively.
Well, the other thing that we have to point to is the fact that he's going to be in the Western Conference, and so the competition is obviously stiffer because
That's not an excuse. If you're the best player in the NBA, there's no excuses, sir. There's just none. You have to do something in the playoffs when you get there. He's not somebody in his second or third season. Right now, he's advanced to the level where he has enough help where he should be able to compete with the Portlands and with the San Antonio Spurs of the league. Now, he may not get past the Rockets or the Warriors, but every other team he should beat. I don't want to hear that Western Conference excuse. If the New Orleans Pelicans go up against the OKC Thunder, they're supposed to beat them if he's truly the player that you guys are claiming he is. That's how that works. Now, of course, when you're playing transcendent teams like a Golden State or a Houston Rockets, then, of course, if you were to lose, I would say okay.
Because the parity that exists within the conferences are not even. And that's really, the level of competition, rather, is not even. And that's something that LeBron James, one of the things that people have lamented about LeBron is that his entire career has been in the East on a night-in, night-out basis. For the most part, he's not going up against those boys in the West. Anthony Davis is doing that. If Anthony Davis were in the Eastern Conference, my God, what would happen? What would happen then? Right now, in the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans are the 4th seed. They got a 9-game winning streak. You know who's number 3? Portland with Damian Lillard. If the playoffs, and obviously with the beginning of the day, Max, you got Denver as an 8th seed. You know what's beautiful about this NBA season? The Clippers are only a half game out of that 8th seed.
And Utah's on both their asses. That's why I stated I don't want to hear any excuses about how Anthony Davis plays in the Western Conference. If your team is good enough to finish in the top half of the Western Conference playoff teams, that means you're supposed to win in the first round. That's what that means.
So if the Clippers were to usurp or eclipse, leap over Denver, what you would have is the Clippers going against Houston in the first round. And who knows what kind of emotions would be revealed during that time.
That would be a very good case study. I agree, sir. That would be an excellent psychological case study for as long as it lasts, even though I don't think that it would last very long, because without Blake Griffin, I don't think that they have the physicality or the manpower to stay with Houston for very long. I don't know if they would have had the manpower even with Blake Griffin.
And what that could ultimately lead to. So it's all very interesting, but in the end, what it comes down to is that Anthony Davis is doing what he's doing in the West without DeMarcus Cousins. And when you take that into consideration, that's something that you have to look at when you're thinking about the best player in the world because of the conditions under which you're subjected to.
Keep in mind, when have we seen Anthony Davis really in a meaningful game? The most meaningful game I can recall is when San Antonio was fighting for playoff position. They were fighting for seeding still, last game of the season a couple of years ago. And both teams needed the game. And as I recall, the San Antonio Spurs were full strength. And AD basically by himself beat the Spurs when the Spurs had something to play for. Now, he didn't have a team around him. Once you get to the playoffs, but he beat the Spurs, Stephen A. When the stakes went up, AD showed up.
Wait a minute, you're forgetting something. Yeah, he beat the Spurs in a regular season game that mattered, that propelled them. But that same year, they went to the playoffs. He had no help. He was a one-man army against Golden State. They got swept, true. But he averaged 30.
That's my point. That's the excuse that I give him. When you're a great player and you face a transcendent team, particularly early in your career, you're going to lose. I don't take any points off of your career for that. But now when you're getting into your 4th, 5th, 6th season, and your team is a 5th seed, a 4th seed, now you have to start winning rounds. If you're the best player in the NBA or the player who people are saying who has got next as the best player in the NBA. That's how that works. Somebody needs to do a meme with Stephen A's face like that. Stephen A got a look on his face like he just heard in his earphone, "You're fired."
By himself against Golden State.
Yep.
So I look at that as being bigger than a win against San Antonio.
No, I don't. It's about winning. He was able to win that regular season game. They needed that win to catapult them into the playoffs. That's more impressive than going against Golden State and getting swept. But what matters is that he played well in that series. But that was 3 years ago now. Now he has to perform in the playoffs and win. He has to win a series, at the very least, for him to initiate some type of momentum for him taking over as the best player in the NBA.
When you think about Anthony Davis, and I know it's positionless basketball, you don't want to call him a center exactly. It's kind of...
No, he's like a 4.5, but that's not anything new. That's not new. People act like a player like Anthony Davis is new. Kevin Garnett was a 4.5 who had three-man skills. It's not that big a deal. You can make the case that Tim Duncan also had those same skills. Chris Webber.
Kind of unfair to call him a power forward because who would you rather have, Karl Malone in his prime or this Anthony Davis? I don't have to think about that very hard. This Anthony Davis is better than Karl Malone ever was.
This Anthony Davis is far more skilled than Karl Malone ever was. But Karl Malone had a strength of mind that I don't think Anthony Davis has. I think that Karl Malone could take Anthony Davis out of his game through his physicality. I've seen Karl Malone take Shaq out of his game through physicality. Take Shaq out of his game. So do not underestimate that. Please understand something. Karl Malone won the MVP, I believe, in 1999 or 2000. No, 99, because Shaq won in 2000. Karl Malone won the MVP in 1999 at the age of like 36, 37, however old he was. Karl Malone was not someone who was going to take it from the top of the key, go through his legs 5,000 times and pull up from 24 feet, from 22 feet. He wasn't going to do that. But Karl Malone could beat you down mentally. And just through his quote-unquote old school game, he could really take your heart. I've seen him do it to a lot of players. So can he do the things that Anthony Davis could do? No. Was Karl Malone's skill set as diversified as Anthony Davis? No. But mentally, Anthony Davis is not in the stratosphere of Karl Malone.
Was this Anthony Davis or Charles Barkley in his prime? I'm taking this Anthony Davis.
That's a stretch, bro. That's a stretch. I don't know if this Anthony Davis is as good as Charles Barkley was that 92-93 season, that first year in Phoenix. He was dominant. Charles Barkley was dominant that year.
This Anthony Davis or Dirk Nowitzki in his prime? I'm taking AD.
Hold on. Whoa. Here's your problem. You got to consider that. The game is called so tightly, you could say Cottonelle Tissue is a huge sponsor, for crying out loud.
Yep.
That's how soft the NBA has become compared to that. So if the game were as physical, what would Anthony Davis do? Because...
Absolutely, especially in light of the fact that he's had a lot of injury issues. Those guys back then, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, they would keep an elbow in his chest, man. They would keep an elbow firmly implanted in his chest. And then we get a chance to see what type of heart he has.
Because even though he might be better, he was more fragile than a Barkley. Barkley was the one getting hurt a lot.
We'll never know.
That was Anthony Davis.
Right. Sure.
Well, we know that.
We'll never know.
That we know.
But what we can see, what we can see is how they each fared in their era. I'm saying, and you're saying, we're both saying, like, AD, if he's not already the best player in the world, there's maybe top 3 already. Maybe he's about to be best player in the world.
Well, no, that's what you're saying. That's not the consensus. You're acting like that's the consensus. I mean, as this season is going on, he's not even as good as James Harden, according to the appraisal of who was affecting their team greater. It's close, but no, James Harden had a greater season than him. And for you or Stephen A. to assess his player arc as being one that's going to surpass the 4 or 5 players that are above him, because I might even have to put Harden above him by the end of this season. It depends on what James does in the playoffs, because the expectations for James and AD are different. James has to at least get to the conference finals and lose in no less than 6 or 7 games to the Warriors for me to say that his season was not a complete failure. AD has to get out the first round. So just the fact that their expectations are different, for me, begs for me to come to the conclusion that AD has quite a few players to leapfrog. Just my view. I think that his his upside is greater than just about any other player in the NBA. But I just can't poo-poo the accomplishments of the players that are above him.
We never thought that about Karl Malone. We never thought that about Charles Barkley. Dirk Nowitzki for a moment. We never thought that about Kevin Garnett. I mean,
yeah, but there's something wrong with your
think
analogy.
about that. Okay, Tim Duncan is a separate thing, but like AD, Tim Duncan was a rim protecting four. What's that?
Yeah, but you're dissecting it. You're dissecting it too much. What's wrong with your analogy? Like, for example, Michael Jordan comes along. Would Michael Jordan have been Michael Jordan if it wasn't for Dr. J? Would Dr. J have been Dr. J if it wasn't for Connie Hawkins? The eras that precede you teach you and elevate you to another level. So when I look at guys of this era and we trying to compare them to guys from eras past, I got to look at what those guys in the past did for these guys today. And I think the same has to be done with Anthony Davis.
No doubt. No doubt, but I'm saying you're choosing up teams. A lot of guys that came after Jordan, I'm still taking MJ. Ain't no one come around since MJ where I'm taking it. I got the number one pick, MJ. Thank you. What I'm saying is applying that. I'm taking AD, except for Tim Duncan. I'm taking him against all the... And by the way, maybe one day we'll say including Tim Duncan. He's a different kind of cat. We're seeing something new and unique and...
Please understand something, Max Kellerman. Tim Duncan won the NBA World Championship in his second season. He had 2 World Championships within his first 5 years. I don't think that Max Kellerman quite grasps, or first 6 years, I don't think that Max Kellerman quite grasps what he's saying. He tried to compare him to players like Karl Malone, Charles Barkley, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, who all won MVP awards in an era where it was far more difficult to score. I like AD. I think that he's on his way. Let's pump the brakes a little bit.
And all-time great.
We got to take a break, guys. Wizards,
But anyway, that's it on this discussion. I do believe that the sky's the limit for Mr. Anthony Davis, but he has to shore up some things. Number one, with his body. He has to bulletproof his body to a far greater degree. He's going to have to push his body to another limit so that he stops getting hurt. He gets too many ticky-tack injuries. It's too easy for him to have to leave the game. Peace.